It's good evening to Ben Johnston. Thank you for joining us here at Yellow Shelf, Ben.
Sure, happy to be here. Yeah, and good morning to you, Joanna.
Yeah, we're coming from different hemispheres, but I love that about the show. Ben, congratulations. You are the host of the Perpetual Chess Podcast. I intentionally hunted you down so you would give an interview. I love chess, not good at it, but you have more than 420 episodes in your vault. You have been doing this an awfully long time. What does the Yellow Shelf audience need to know about your podcast?
Yeah, it's crazy to think about. I started Perpetual Chess. It was one of the first chess podcasts in December of 2016. It's primarily an interview show. So
Yeah.
I interview everything from elite players to what I call adult improvers, which are just amateurs who enjoy chess, who want to get better at the game, which it turns out is quite challenging, especially the older you get, the more challenging it gets. And even do some book reviews, cover top chess news. So just try to tell people's stories about chess, basically from every angle through interviews. And yeah, I've been at it for a long time now.
Yeah. And Ben, what can you tell us? What inspired you to create? Tell us about your background and how back in 2016 you said how
You
you
got it.
created this
Yeah.
podcast and what that journey was about.
Yeah, so I've had sort of a career, or I've had several careers. I've been in and out of different working environments. I went to university here in the United States in my 20s, almost went to law school. I was a chess master, which is pretty good, but maybe not as good as it sounds. Like it's kind of like here in the US, I equate it to being like a minor league sports athlete. Like you're not in the big leagues, but you're better than most people.
Yeah.
So I was kind of at that level of chess, but plenty good to be a teacher. And I ended up starting to teach at some school programs in my 20s. Instead of pursuing a sort of more corporate route, I almost went to law school and decided to do that instead. And I loved it. But then one thing led to another. Before you knew it, I was a professional poker player. I did that for 7 years and actually had a lot of chess friends who did quite well at poker as well. But then eventually it became harder to play poker in the United States. So at this point, I have an undergraduate degree, but not much else, and not much of a corporate history to speak of. And I still love chess. So I went back to the chess world and fast forward a few years, and that's when I was getting into podcasts and noticed that there were no real podcasts about chess. And I was reasonably well connected in the chess world. So I decided just to take the plunge and just to start interviewing people. And yeah, I've been going ever since.
Oh, well, keep going because your episodes are fascinating. Your guests are fascinating. We were chatting before, Ben. Chess is a universal game. Rich, poor, first world, second world countries. Like it's a language. It's a game, isn't it?
Yeah, that's one of the things I love about the game is this connective tissue that people feel throughout the world. If you go, I always say, if you go to a new place in the world and you don't know anyone, you can find where they're playing chess, and pretty soon you'll have a whole social network. I mean, I think music is like that, but I don't think there are many other things that have that sort of universal appeal no matter where you go. And I take pride in having a global audience and also just interviewing people from all over the world and hearing how chess is, it's in school programs sanctioned by the government in places like Armenia and Hungary. But in places like Australia, where you're
Yeah.
from, I have interviewed a few Australian players, but I know that chess isn't quite as popular there and viewed more as a hobby. In Europe, it's pretty highly professionalized. So it runs the gamut. And of course, I've also interviewed a lot of people who do chess at the grassroots level, nonprofits, and stuff like that. So chess in prisons, like the list goes on. So I love that it can touch people from so many walks of life and bring them together.
Yeah. And look, you're probably right. Certainly in my country, chess is always just seen as a hobby. We get snippets of the news when a Netflix show about chess drops and does well,
Right.
or in recent months, I guess the controversy around dress code policies in the chess
Exactly.
world.
It's
So
always bad news when chess makes global headlines, unfortunately.
yeah. And look, my final question is about connecting with you, Ben. You've got a great website, a newsletter, like YouTube channel. If we're curious, I'll put this in our show notes. But how does someone watching get involved in your podcast?
Yeah, so we're like a lot of podcasts, like doing more video presentation, and I do have a newsletter where I just send out all the best chess articles I've read. Some of it is focused on sort of professional level chess, but as you alluded to, Joanna, there's been a lot of, people are worried about cheating with computer help. There was a huge story involving the world champion that went viral a couple years ago. And there's a lot of sort of squabbling over different conditions. So it can be a bit of a downer, but there's also just people who dedicate their time as adults. They might say, I have 5 hours a week. I'd like to get better at this game. What's the best way to do it?
Yeah.
So they come and share their stories, and we bounce ideas off of each other and give advice. So a lot of the newsletter is about that. People trying to hold themselves accountable, like they might if you're trying to improve like your jogging time or something like that. So yeah, the ways to keep up are obviously to sub to the podcast, but I also have a Substack newsletter called the
Yeah.
Perpetual Chess Link Fest that people can uh, keep up with
Right.
via that.
Yeah, I'll put that in the show notes. We were sort of chatting before we came on, didn't we, Ben, about, I have kids and I'd really like them to get into chess. And it makes me think back to my childhood. We had a chess set that was the Simpsons characters.
Oh, I love that set. Yeah.
That's a universal. But, chess just is the language across many genres, isn't it? So, yeah, thanks for joining us here, Ben, today. It's been
Oh,
great.
sure. Yeah. Thanks for
Yeah.
having me. It's been fun.
Cheers.